all you beautiful people. My name is Sean Talley. I'm a member of the Paper Street Pictures production team, and I want to welcome you to this initial podcast recap installment for the new SyFy Channel television series Revival. That's right, we are detouring from our usual interviews with filmmakers about independent filmmaking for a short stint on this feed to bring you a series of episode recaps for the season of said television show. So if you are checking out this podcast, may it be after and only after you have watched the pilot episode of Revival, as we will be spoiling it throughout. Joining me for hosting duties on this venture, she is a comedian and actor, someone who can recite the spiel like Kate Hudson in Almost Famous of your tray tables being in upright full lock positions. She is Liz MacArthur. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm excited to be here. Hello. Exit doors are over the wing.
But yes, Liz is joining me here, and we thank you all so much for tuning into the program hosted on the Paper Street Podcast Network feed. We are here to discuss the pilot episode of Revival entitled Don't Tell Dad, a great line that's straight out of the hit Image comic series by the book's creators Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. As for the we in question, the we beyond Liz and I, that is, we are joined by the co-creators of the television series adaptation. These two gentlemen also serve as co-showrunners and executive producers. First up, he is an Emmy Award winner, a filmmaker who has directed the feature film Revealer, which was co-written by the aforementioned Tim Seeley and Michael Morisi, who shares a writing credit on this program's pilot episode. Welcome, Mr. Luke Boyce, to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Liz. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
Yes, great to have you. Great to speak with you again, sir. And alongside Luke, we are joined by my fellow Paper Street Pictures mate, the founder of said production company, a man who has directed features including The Pale Door and Scare Package, and produced films including Starry Eyes, Lucky McKee's Old Man, and the Independent Spirit Award-nominated film The Artifice Girl. Welcome, Mr. Aaron B. Koontz.
Hey. Glad to be here.
Yay.
Talk about a show.
Well, yes, to that point, let us first say congratulations to you both on this show finally getting out into the world. I know firsthand what a labor of love it has been for you both, as well as a number of talented cast and crew who have helped bring this series to life. And again, no small feat to get a television series not just greenlit, but in the can and on the air. And it's also good. So congrats.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
So before we jump into the specifics about episode 101, let us go back to the beginning, life before Revival Day, if you will, and have you gents give the listeners a bit of backstory on how this particular series first saw the light of day.
Yeah, it goes, I'll take this one. It goes far back. I met Tim Seeley in 2016 at C2E2 Comic-Con in Chicago, and I'm from the area just south of Chicago, so I knew that Tim was a Chicago native and was in love with the comic, so I wanted to talk to him. And at the time we were making some independent features, myself and my producing partner, and asked if he'd want to just work on something, try to get something made. And over the course of like 6 months, we would constantly meet for drinks and just talk about all kinds of stuff. And then one day he's like, oh, by the way, Revival's available if you want to do Revival. And I about leapt out of my chair. I was a huge fan of the comic. I've been reading the comic for a couple of years. So I was like, yeah, if you want to do it, then wonderful. Let's try it. Let's see what we can do.
You were doing the long con.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, getting him drunk. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's how it happened. No, Tim and Mike they'd been around the bend a little bit with it. Tim especially with like Hack Slash and other properties, and they just kind of weren't interested in doing the traditional Hollywood route. They wanted to do something. They weren't worried about like the option money. They wanted to do something that got made, because a lot of these properties, they get optioned, they just don't get made. They just sit in development hell for the longest time. And we were like, listen, I will give everything of myself to this. I will bleed Revival and get this made. And it took a while. We started it out as a feature adaptation. We were kind of playing with that idea and trying to raise money, but it just, no matter where we went with it, we just realized that the feature was too big, and while also like not able to capture the full scope of this comic. So, at a certain point, we kind of diverted into Revealer, which Tim wrote during COVID. We're just like, we got to do something. We had been working on trying to get this project off the ground. And that's where I met Aaron for the first time. Aaron produced Revealer, and we started talking and kind of built a cool, fun, creative relationship. We both saw eye to eye on everything. And that's rare these days. And, you jump at those opportunities when you meet people like that. And so I sent him a copy of the comic and he really took to it immediately. And we started talking about it quite a lot. And eventually we just kind of decided to do this together. It was Aaron's idea to kind of, really push this as a TV series. He saw it immediately as a TV series and had ideas. And we started talking about it that way. And yeah, the rest is history. Did I miss something? I'm sure I missed a bunch of details.
No, I mean, it's funny and kind words there, Luke. Thank you. Like, I think it's so rare to have a creative partnership like this. Like, I watched they have like these similar things on Last of Us, and I watched like Neil and Craig talk, and I'm like, I wonder if they fight. I wonder what they bicker about. And we really are in this like wonderful place where like Luke and I truly do see eye to eye on so many levels. And I think that was figured out in post on Revealer, this tiny movie. It's on Shudder now. Great movie that Luke made. And I will say too, like part of the credit of that movie was seeing Luke's ability where, this was during COVID and we were making this. And so I wasn't actually on set. And so I'm giving these notes in post to this dude I haven't met in person. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to push this. I'm going to try to make this the best I can. I think this movie can be even better. And I gave a ton of notes. And I was like, this guy's going to hate me. Like, he's just going to rip me apart. And it wasn't that. He listened and we talked through, and the things that I was wrong on and he was right on, or vice versa. It wasn't even about that. It was just about coming together to make the best thing. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, there's really something here. And then the more we talked, the more we realized like how many similarities we have, raised in like Christian homes, atheists now, what we've become, our views of the world, big NBA fans, even though he's a Laker fan, unfortunately for Luke. Go Pacers. So those types of things, but we really started to bond over that. And when he sent this over to me, I was familiar with Tim and Mike's work, Tim in particular with Hackslash. And I had heard of Revival, but I had not read Revival. And that first issue was just immediately a pilot. It just was like, this is a pilot. And they had thought about that too. Like, they had thought about that. And so that really kind of, it reinvigorated me. Like, at that time, through Paper Street, as many might know, like I make a lot of movies, but a lot of times it's as a producer and in situations like it was with Luke. But I'm my first and foremost, like I was a writer first. Like, that is at my heart what I love to do the most. And I always say I became a director to protect my writing, became a producer to protect my directing. And so while I love producing and making films like Revealer, which is a great movie, I wanted to get back into the creative cockpit, if you will, myself. And I was like, I can see how this could be adapted. I really see where this could be. And I was like, why don't we join forces? Let's do this. I think I can sell this show. Never sold a TV series before, but I think I can sell this. I believe we can. And let's like co-show run. But let's do it as co-showrunners. Let's do it together, partners, and let's try to make this thing. And that's what we pitched it as, and Luke and his team were very gracious to give us a little shopping agreement at Paper Street to try to go pitch. And, we talked with a lot of people, talked with the HBOs of the world, AMC's of the world, all this stuff, different people. But SyFy really took to it immediately. And it was just very exciting because there was an existing relationship that I had with them. My first feature, Camera Obscura, was actually made through the Chiller network, which is now defunct. I like to say that our movie killed Chiller, for better or for worse, Camera Obscura. And but that executive there is now higher up and working with SyFy and USA, Justin. And he was already familiar with the project. So it really kind of was serendipitous and came together. And it was a pretty quick yes from them. It just took forever to actually be greenlit after that. But the first initial yes of like greenlighting, getting us a pilot and moving things forward, paying for the script and whatnot and getting that going was not hard. Like I just had a good relationship, and thankfully they liked working with me in the past and liked the property, and we were off and running.
No, that's pretty amazing. And all things considered, I mean, we were on the heels of a mega strike, COVID, and so many other things where it was actually arguably more difficult in that kind of range of years to get TV shows greenlit. So the fact that they were, believed in the material, the relationship you had with Justin, I think that makes it all the more amazing that it came through when there's so many things that are hard to get off the ground right now. And, even the streamers are struggling to have new content because they've kind of stagnated so badly from all the aforementioned stuff, fires. There's so many things that have happened in and around the industry in LA in the past several years. But yeah, again, amazing achievement that you both got this show and that they agreed to let you guys be co-show runners.
There were definitely discussions about us co-show running. Like we thought we were going to have to bring in a lot of other people who had done a lot of TV and what was there. I think there was a little bit of trust that had come in from, like I said, like making those features and knowing that we weren't just writers. Like there was a quote, I can't recall who it was, but it was talking about as a writer and you become a showrunner, it's like you're a writer and then all of a sudden you're managing a TJ Maxx. And they're like, we don't even know what the hell we're doing, and how you have to do this. And the good thing is I have weirdly managed a lot of TJ Maxx in my life in that realm, right? Just both in the tech sector, at managerial jobs, and then as a producer, I've done this 25 features or so now. Luke also has his own company, they're doing so much, they're doing features, they're doing all kinds of things. So like, I think we came in at an age to where we had that side down and then we could prove that we could do it creatively. And that was going to be in the pilot script. And they're like, okay, well, let's see if you can put this together, and that in our show Bible and all those materials, which a lot of the show Bible credit goes to Luke for stuff he had done for years and years prior. I think all of that combined with again, like I said, the relevant experience, in the indie genre world, but then also working with me, 10 years prior, give or take, where a lot of things went wrong on that. And I had a lot of room to where, let's say, I could have complained and I didn't. And I took the high road and just was grateful for that experience and have that Universal logo roll past, with the Jerry Goldsmith score before the movie started, and, got all giddy about that. And was like, I don't want to mess with that. And, goes to show that those relationships will matter, and deciding not to put your feet down and kick and scream when I had a reason to do that. I had reasons to be upset for things that had happened. My cut of that film was never released, but instead of fighting, I took the high ground, wanted to maintain that relationship. And I'm very glad that I did, because it paid off for us later.
One of the things that I think, and just to praise Aaron a little bit, one thing that really was important to me was we had been approached many times. I mean, when you're selling something for years and years and years, you talk to everybody. And we had multiple people come and ask about, making it a TV show or doing it this way or doing it that way. Just producer after producer, there were producers involved. And one of the reasons we hadn't done it at that point, we hadn't even pursued it, was because we were just told over and over again that we couldn't have creative control. We couldn't show run. We wouldn't be allowed to show run. I was even told I couldn't direct or anything like that, at certain points. And it was just like, we stuck to our guns. And I remember we turned down some pretty lucrative offers in multiple cases because they just wanted to buy it and kick us away. And then when we met Aaron, it wasn't even a discussion. It was like, no, we're going to do this. There's no situation where somebody else comes in and show runs for us. We're going to do it. And it was just an immediate level of confidence that even had, like, having in me was like, just meant the world to me. And just how our creative discussions evolved from there. And, it was a powerful and empowering thing to hear that. And then, of course, he was right. We went through it. And yeah, there were some questions at first, but it really wasn't an issue. And I remember we had a producer involved for a little bit of time who laughed when I even suggested, that I could show run. It just wasn't even a question. So I haven't said this yet publicly, but I have to give so much credit to Aaron for believing in me, believing in the project, believing in this, because it changed everything. And here we are.
We have to fight now, I feel like.
Yeah.
So we have to fight or kiss, one or the other, or something, right? That's so kind, dude. Yeah. I mean, look, you find good people, you want to work with them. I've known Sean Talley and I met on the bus in 7th grade. You know what I mean? Like you find good folks, you just want to stick with them. You want to have people in your life that you trust, and it's there. And I trust Luke implicitly. And I think it allows us to kind of, as crazy things have happened in our lives while we've been making the show and all these things, to where it's like, hey man, can you get this? Can you get this? And to be able to divide and conquer and learn along the way, running a writer's room, all these things that we had to kind of figure out along the way. And yeah, so far it seems to have worked out. And I imagine, I've never had a kid, but I know some people here have. I imagine it's like that. It's like, okay, I got a kid now. I just got to figure this shit out, and that's what it was. I got a show now. I just got to figure this shit out. And that's the way I approached it in every way.
Right. Everybody's got imposter syndrome. The people you think don't are also the ones Googling how to do the very mundane things in life too. But no, I mean, to Aaron's credit, if we can continue to heap praise, he and I have a few similar sensibilities, obviously being friends 30 years, but the whole adage of like, the worst thing they're going to do is tell you no. Mm-hmm. Well, pushing back even further, sometimes he and I can't stand when people's answer of why are we always doing it this way? Well, that's because it's the way it's always been done. And again, someone had to take a chance on everybody to be a first-time director, which Universal did with Aaron. Same with showrunning. Well, why can't I be a showrunner? They'll laugh you out of the building. But when you say why, fight. They go, well, that's just not how it is. Well, keep fighting. I mean, you guys, Aaron is a fighter. And again, that's why he is where he is and has this many features under his belt as a director and a producer. So again, credit to him for fighting that fight. And again, no small feat to just suddenly be a showrunner of a cable network series.
Nope.
So you guys talked about...
That's enough on me. That's enough on me. We can, let's talk about the show. I can't take it.
No.
It's all weird.
So we'll segue to the pilot itself in just a moment, but you talked about how there were certain things that were easier than you thought. Do you guys have something that sticks out as maybe the largest challenge of bringing it to screen? You had the deep show Bible, you had the content there in the comic that kind of fed into making it easy. Even Tim had it in his brain as writing it episodically, as many comics are serialized already. It being a TV show, was there a major challenge, whether it be logistic or just the filming or just getting it over a certain hurdle?
I mean,
there are so many challenges.
Exactly. Like it's kind of like if you asked me, that's like asking me my favorite movie. And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
Well, I do. It's Jaws. But other than that, like I can't, like I need to like, you need to give me more niches and genre specific and decades and things. So like, it's like, okay, what was the toughest in development and prep and this? Because every single time I felt like we were met with barriers, like just can't do, again, the you can't do this never stopped. It still isn't stopping. Like we're not done with the show right now. It still isn't stopping. Like I'm literally texting an hour ago asking about the budget of the VFX. Like we can't get this done for this amount of money and whatever. And we're trying to like move things and switch things and trick, how we're editing it to like make things work. Like we're continuing without cutting shots. Because I'm like, no, we can't cut that. We have to keep this. So we're still pushing past every barrier that they've put in front of us. And I mean, the writer's room was its own challenge. The development itself of like, we had to go through so many iterations of this pilot script. I mean, I can't even tell you how many drafts that came through on that. Because keep in mind at this time, it wasn't just SyFy, right? So like NBC was not making a ton of shows. So we ended up having a lot more chefs in the kitchen, if you will, trying to tell us how this needed to go. And so there were opinions from, people who could be from the Peacock side. And then we have our international sales partner in Dynamic Television, and they have their opinions. And then we have, other higher ups at executives at NBC and SyFy and USA and all this stuff coming in. Then it's being sent to like other people that we never met, and they have their notes. And it just like, it felt like it was never ending. And then we have Bell Media and our Canadian partners. So it's just, again, so many people coming in trying to tell you what you can and can't do, what this must be and can't be. And it just kept reaching this point, and it goes back to that trust that I have in Luke and each other, is that like, yeah, but I'm kind of feeling this. And Luke's like, I'm kind of feeling it. I'm like, okay, then fuck it. We're moving forward, right? Mm-hmm. Like we kind of have to trust your gut and find those things and do it. So I mean, I would say casting was extremely difficult. It was very hard just because there's certain monetary restrictions, not just in like the horrible pay that we were able to offer everyone, but also like knowing where we really had to try because the budget kept getting like just smashed down. We had to keep more people to Ontario, Toronto. We're shooting in New Brunswick, which that alone could be the answer because there's literally in New Brunswick, in St. John, New Brunswick, it's an Atlantic time zone, a time zone I didn't know existed, and a town I've never been to. And they don't even have a film. They don't have like a film hub. There's no locations hub. There's no none of this stuff. There's no infrastructure. Like when I say none, I mean literally none. So you go and talk to this bar and you're like, I want to shoot there. And they're like, yeah, sure. And then next thing you know, they've rented it out to someone else. I'm like, oh, we didn't know that was like couldn't do that. Or we didn't know we couldn't keep it open while you were shooting. Like crazy things that you're having to like shuffle all this stuff. But of all the things, I would say the most difficult was we made this series in 2 blocks of 5 episodes. And when we were writing, there were a lot of changes that kind of got pushed onto us and that we accepted, don't get me wrong, for what to do in the second half creatively from the network. But then on top of that, we ran out of money at the beginning of the show. So then the second half, we're having to rewrite scenes to make things work. We're having to like consolidate locations and all this. And I mean, the amount of times, and this happened multiple times, where we're there at lunch, we're shooting, we're also in block 1 with our amazing directors, Amanda and Samir. And Amanda's in block 1. I'm working with her and she's like, okay, I'm going to go over. We can't make our day. I'm like, okay, shit. Okay, so then we're looking at what's left for the day. By the meantime, we're also prepping with Samir for block 2. So I'm getting contact from him and he's like, hey, we need this help to get this. We don't have a location. This fell out. Well, you're on set for block 1. And then, and not only that, they can't make the day and we can't go into overtime. And if we can't go back to this location, we can't shoot it. So the scene won't work. So literally I would go into the trailer, like, okay, everybody leave me alone for 1 hour. And like, I'd be like, okay, Luke, you run back to set and like, make sure things don't get set on fire, or he's running back and forth between different things. I'm locking myself in a trailer, rewriting pages. And I'm like, I hope this will work. And then I walk over to Melanie Scrofano and I'm like, hey, Mel, sorry. This is what you're saying and doing now. And she's like, what? And I'm like, this is the only way to fit it in the time we have. And that happened, a couple times a week. I mean, and I would come home and I would talk to my partner, Katie, on the weekend. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, listen, I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. I'm saving the show this weekend. Like literally, I mean, that's what I thought in my head. It's like, we have to rewrite, cut pages, figure this out, change they can't make this week. We can't make this week. And you're having to save the show, save the show, save the show. That stretch, the end of block 1, beginning of block 2, is a complete and utter blur. I don't know how we did it. Even Samir, our block 2 director, will tell you, he's like, I thought this was not going to cut. This was not going to work. I mean, he almost had a panic attack on one of the last days of shooting. Like literally was catatonic standing there at one point. And I'm like, Samir, we got to do this. Like take down the thing. And he's like, I can't, Aaron, I can't, just not right now. And we all just sat there silent for like 30 seconds of just like deafening silence because we're like, okay, is Samir going to have a breakdown? Am I going to have to step in right now and tell people? Like it was all, and then he's like, okay, got it. And he came back and like snapped to, and then we finished and got that day. But there's so many examples of that. But that stretch, oh my God, the overlap, of the block 1 and block 2 was unreal. It's still unreal. Like thinking about it right now, I get heart palpitations.
I mean, I'll say on the adaptation portion of it too, the amount of challenges we gave to ourselves, I think is, and I don't mean to say this in a bad thing. Like one of the things about being in the indie space, I think we know, is that you have to sort of work from a place of ambition, right? You're always trying to make this dollar stretch into 10. So you're constantly thinking, okay, what creative limitations can I pose on myself to make things better, to create things better? And we did that right away. And I remember just, rewinding all the way to the beginning, just in the adaptation standpoint, I remember thinking, okay, what are we doing the same? What are we doing similar? And there's a million examples of this, but one that comes to mind is in the comic, M kind of has amnesia a little bit. So like this thing happens to her and she wakes up and she just can't remember anything. And I remember, one of the first things you think about with a story is you go, okay, this is a murder victim who is alive. So theoretically, this should be the easiest mystery to solve in the world, right? You ask the murder victim who killed you, right? Perfect. Great. So you have to make that interesting. You have to make that into a mystery. That's tough. And the comic does it with sort of just this like vague amnesia thing, which it works great in the comic. And the comic just is able to sort of expand that story. But we wanted to focus that murder mystery a lot more in the TV show. We wanted to really pull that out. And I remember Aaron saying, I'm not going to do amnesia. I can't do amnesia. It's too convenient. I don't want to do it. And so we were like, okay, how can we turn this into a stronger story? Why does M not remember? And a lot of that storyline, a lot of the M storyline even kind of bloomed out of that and sort of creating, okay, what are these guardrails, these story guardrails we have? Like, we're not going to do this. So we got to challenge ourselves to tell the story differently, tell the story, in a more grounded way and in a way that we can sort of sleep at night with. So that was one right off the bat, and how the M storyline evolves early on. And you'll see in episode 2, we expand on that a lot, but that was a big thing, even for the pilot that we did. And there's a million examples of how we challenged ourselves all the time, created our own challenges to just adapt better.
Right. You kind of naturally segued us into talking about the episode. So let's actually kind of jump in a little bit to episode 101, Don't Tell Dad.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned casting and everything. Were you heavily involved in the casting? And like, how did you round it down to like the family, like the main cast?
Yeah, it was tricky. I mean, we were definitely involved, probably to some folks might have thought too involved. We were it was vital to us, and we knew how important casting was. And, from the get-go, we were making our own lists and pushing ideas and everything that we could try to find. But it started with finding our Melanie, but it's finding our Dana, because Melanie and Dana are so synonymous and I can't think of it any other way. But there was a time in some weird alternate universe where we were sent a list of people with some big names and all kinds of people on it to potentially, be a Dana. And it was was Luke in particular who was more familiar with some of Mel's work and was really vibing. And then I watched her like I knew her from, I'd seen her in Letterkenny, I'd seen a couple episodes of Winter Herb, Ready or Not, and a number of things that had popped out. And I saw they were all different. Like you could just see the range that was there and the comedic timing. But then, oh my God, when we watched the reel, it was like, this is like, put freckles in this person. That's Dana. Like this was so everything. And she just checked so many boxes. And then honestly, it was going to her Instagram and watching like videos of her. And I'm like, she is so damn funny. There's just charisma. She's just got so much coming, everywhere. And so that's where it started. I mean, we met with her, hit it off, and just kind of knew that we needed her to be our Dana. And it took a while. There were times where they were trying to say, you got to get this massive person, and we were like, oh my God, can we just like get the best actor, that's here? And it worked out great because Mel does have a following and especially a fan base within SyFy, but then was the best actor. And so, that was so exciting, but that was the first domino to fall. Then from there, because we're building from the inside out of, the Cypress family. There were a couple, I guess, side characters that we had casted that didn't necessarily fall into the central piece, but the Cypress family being the heart of the whole show, it started with there. And then after that, it was like, okay, now let's find, I almost said our David, to find our Wayne, right? That suggestion actually came from our international sales agent, Dan March at Dynamic. He knew David James Elliott from JAG. And I remember watching JAG when I was a kid, and like my girlfriend in high school, her dad was obsessed with JAG. Like I remember I couldn't drop her off. And Sean, you knew her, June. I couldn't drop her off at her house when JAG was playing because we couldn't interrupt JAG. So like, that's what I remembered about this, and this whole thing and the obsessiveness of it. And so, but we were able to chat with him. He just exuded so much of Wayne's energy and what was there. He's just a big teddy bear. And then, but more importantly, with the dynamic and making it work was going to be, the Martha M. Cypress. And that was, we weren't trying to, give us a list of names. We were just like, see as many tapes as we could. We're like, okay, we'll get a couple names around here. We'll get some people that you can sell and market. But we need to just find, we just need someone to leap off the page, leap off the screen, to be our M. And we saw hundreds of tapes for M, and came down to like a final 3. And I remember Luke cried when he saw Romy's tape, and we were like, there's something really, really special here. Like you could just feel it. And she looked like she could pair with Mel really well. And it was one of the best decisions we've ever made, because I think in the pilot, you don't get to see fully like what Martha M's arc is and where it goes. It's really Dana's episode, and she really kind of comes to the forefront in the next episode. But there's these hints of so many things that are on the surface, and there's so much that she goes through. I mean, we don't put anyone through the ringer. If anyone's familiar with the comics, and you kind of get an idea of some of the stuff that happens, and the shit that hits the fan with her, Romy just went for it every single day. So that was pretty magical. And then, we talk about like our first 5, if you will, of our cast. And the next would have been our Ibrahim. And, this was someone that Mel, now being Dana, was okay, I want to prove who this is going to be. We got to find the right person. And we were looking, and I had seen Mrs. Davis on Peacock, and he was amazing. He plays Jesus in it. It's such a cool character. It's an interesting thing. And then, but also was in like shows like Outer Banks and stuff where he plays a villain, and watched his reel. I was like, wow, this guy has something. So he was a name that I gave to the casting people. And sure enough, he was already tracking the show. So it was kind of this like serendipitous thing. And Andy is such a scene stealer in everything. So he's complete magic. And then the last there would be, we wanted to go a little bit of a different direction with Blaine. And that was a decision. I'll let Luke elaborate more there. But I will say we saw a ton of great tapes. Like there were a couple actors that like I want to hire in the future because they just gave such a killer Blaine tape. But I was so like, it has to be Stephen Ogg. And I mean, I was like, guys, I don't even want to look at the list. It's just got to be Stephen Ogg. It's got to be Stephen Ogg. I just kept saying it. I was told so many times that it can't happen. We can't afford him. Not going to happen. And it got very close to not happening. But I wrote him a letter, said, hey, can I just Zoom? Can I talk with him? Anything, just give me an opportunity to chat. And he was gracious to give me that time. And we had like a 2.5 hour Zoom and just like totally clicked and vibed. And, and he's like, look, I want to do this show. I want to do this. And immediately dove into the character and talked about things. And once we get to the end of the season, we can talk about stuff that happens with Blaine or doesn't happen with Blaine. And I can give more info into some of that conversation. There were some interesting tidbits that came out of that. But he just dove in 110%. And but I think we have like a 50-person ensemble cast on this. Like, this is like an insane. It's like stupid. It's just completely and totally insane. And like, I don't think there's not a weak one in the bunch. I mean, it is unbelievable the caliber of talent that we got for the money and going out to New Brunswick randomly, and doing this. It's unbelievable who we're able to pull off. But I could talk about the cast all day because I'm so proud of them.
Please do. I have another question about casting a specific person in the beginning in the graveyard, the naked man running. How do you get that job? Did he know one of you, or is it naked extra casting, or how do you get that job?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's funny because I know that like NBC was so worried. We had to send images to prove that no crotch was being shown over and over again, like zoomed in, and what's there. But he's so Luke, he was background for something else too. Isn't he the guy that sits up in the?
Yes.
Yeah. So the guy actually who sits up.
Unfortunately, I left for a week. I was there the whole entire time. I left for the most exciting week of shooting. I swear. It was like when we burned the burnt man. I missed that. I missed the naked guy running through all the good stuff. I completely missed. So I didn't even get to meet him or anything like that. But I'm pretty.
Yeah. And what was crazy? So that night, it was not supposed to rain. I mean, it was not written in the script to rain, I will say, but we had to lean into it that it was raining. And this is the middle of the night. It is unbelievably cold and dude's naked running through here. And we're having to do take after take after take. And of course, Amanda had set up this really nice blocking and how we're going to like pivot and turn and reveal everyone. And so he's just again running through these scenes, total trooper. I mean, like the amount of confidence that dude has, like, good for you, man. I'm proud of you. But I'm pretty certain he's also the dead body that sits up at the beginning, because that was also a tough thing, who can be zipped up that whole time and sit there, and then sit up on the call. So, and he might even be something else too.
Yeah,
so
I think that's why he's naked, right? It's because he was coming out of the crematorium. He was coming out of the body bag. So he didn't have any clothes anyway. They brought him in, or he was in
I made the show with you, and I don't think I ever correlated that.
I was about to say, like, are we headcanoning that he got out of the coffin and reacted by taking his clothes off, or was he buried naked? Luke has got the headcanon that he was the guy in the body bag.
When you pull them out, what are those called?
The drawer thing?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Like when they're knocking on the
slab.
Yeah, sorry, I'm totally blanking, but I'm pretty sure
yes, when they're in the fridge area thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I pictured. I just knew like someone would be naked, in this thing. And I really wanted to show like, some male genitalia in this show. Like that was actually what the goal was, but that is not going to fly on cable. So, that's all good. I'm more proud of them, but that was the plan. And I thought it'd be really funny. And that's the whole thing. We want to establish tone, and I think that's one of the things is that this is a crazy thing that's happening, and we're not playing it for laughs, but it's funny, But it's also real. Like if this really happened, there's probably a naked dude running in the background, and what's there. But at the same time, Dana is not like, ha, 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 pointing and laughing at this guy. She's like, oh my God, what is happening? And you're kind of feeling the culmination of all these things at once. And I think that helped kind of set that tone and to feel like what this is really going to be. But yeah, trooper, that dude was such a trooper. Yeah.
Not enough Americans have watched British comedy. Male dong is a rite of passage in comedy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I'll say too, like, when you're trying to kind of working on this thing for a while, you also realize how important these characters are. So like getting a Dana, a Wayne, and especially an M specifically to work right. And we made a conscious decision to make sure that these not only were they great actors, but that they were the comic come to life. Like we really want to do that. The Cypress sisters in the comic are so important. And when you're off, I've done so many Comic Cons with Tim and literally met people in M cosplay. And that kind of does something to you. You're like, this character means a lot to people. And we wanted to honor that. So, what was cool about like Dana, Dana's just very specific in the comic. And Melanie just really, she took that, she is that, and then made it even better. You know what I mean? Like it just was somehow, she's just so good that she is Dana, but she's Dana times 2, times 3. And Romy is the same way. Romy was especially fun because getting someone like that who doesn't have, this massive following or anything like that, you can really you really view her as M, and watching Romy really just completely envelop this character and become this character. So it is hers, it's Romy's character. It's very much her creation while also feeling so much like the comic. Like I do really feel like it's the comic come to life, and that's fun to do. So the Cypresses especially, we wanted to do that. And even Wayne, I think, we've taken Wayne a little bit in a slightly more active position than I think he is in the comic, but still sort of, it's crazy how much David feels like that comic. And I will say the funny thing about Wayne is the original Wayne in the comic is actually based off Tim's dad. And David looks more like Tim's dad than the comic version does. And Tim was like freaking out because it's like, yeah, it's basically my dad. It's just, I can't, it's very, very strange. So that was fun. And then like Aaron was saying, Blaine was the one character where we like, let's do something interesting here, because the character in the comic is a demonologist tow truck operator, right? So right there alone, you have sort of you have this basis from which to just have a pretty good time. And we're like, but we could take this so much farther. Like, let's just do something really interesting here. And he's a foil in the comic. He's one of the lesser foils in the comic. And we just felt like it's such a weird character. It's such an opportunity to build such an interesting character that we really wanted to kind of take that farther. So you get the bones of what Blaine is. He is still this religious tow truck operator, but we're doing something with Blaine that's a bit of a departure from the comic, which is fun. We have that opportunity. So we're kind of playing, the faithfulness in these respects, the Cypress family, which I think is the core of the story. It should feel the same. And then we've got these other characters where they're great in the comic. We take it a little different. So you get both flavors. And I think fans will still love it. I think they're in for a real surprise.
I do love that a lot of these, I was like flipping through the comic while I was watching it, and some of these characters look just pulled straight out. Like what's the child's name? I'm so sorry. The boy with the
Cooper.
Yes, Cooper. Yeah, like he looks like you just like pulled him off of a page and set him in the TV show.
Yeah.
That's funny because what's interesting with Cooper is that was one where like Luke and I, or maybe this might have just me, like as two chubby kids growing up, we were like, we want a chubby, awkward kid. So we really tried to find, but there's not a lot of chubby, awkward kids that were available like in Ontario, So, I wanted a couple, there was a couple kids that I wanted. One was from Australia, a couple of things that we thought about, but I was like, there's no way we could pull this off. But then we met Hudson, and he had done a ton of acting, which was something that was very important to us. Getting someone who had gone through the ringer and understood how to be on a set, and how to carry himself. So that was important. And I was very sad to change. There's a line in episode 6, without giving anything away, where it was like, that chubby kid, and it's like, oh, that scrawny kid. And we had to change it from chubby kid to that scrawny kid. And that was a little, that one hurt a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay. Because Hudson was amazing. Yeah.
I'll say one of my favorites is Randy. As far as jumping off the page, Randy was so much fun to cast. Mm-hmm. Hard though. Like we had some really fun ideas that we really wanted and they did not work out, but we stumbled across Graham Barrett, who most people know as Audio Opera or Divorced Dads on it's he in TikTok? I know he's on Instagram, YouTube. Yeah, just one of the funniest comedy content creators on the internet. Aaron and I would just go through his stuff and just die laughing. And we were like, we have to get this guy. And Aaron just emailed him and was like, hey, dude, you want to do this? And I remember the first time I showed Tim this, like just a clip from the thing. He's like, oh my God, how did you do that? Because Randy is the first person you see in the show. He is the first person you see in the comic. I mean, it was like really important for us to make sure that landed, that was a really fun thing to cast. And he's one of my favorite characters in the show. I don't think he's in the show enough. I want to do so much more with Randy. I'm so excited.
100%. Like that was one of the more fun ones. And I don't mind saying who we first made our offer to. Our first offer for Randy was Tom Green. Yes. And so, because he's got the beard now. Yeah. He's actually, and he lives in Northern Ontario, and he's got this beard, and he's, and he's kind of become this like farmer version of himself. And I wrote him a letter too, and he get to bring his dog and everything. And we went all in to try to make that happen. But he's very picky now about what he does and just doesn't want to work a lot, and more power to him. I love that he's created this solitary life for himself. But I was like, come out of retirement, buddy. I want Tom Green. I want Freddie Got Fingered to open up this thing. But yeah, then after that, it was like, okay, let's go through comedians, and who we could find. And Luke was who found Graham. And yeah, I was like, there's an email here. I don't know who it goes to. I'm going to try because I think this guy's great. And he's become a good pal. And yeah, no, it became a situation. There's a few characters where once you get in, and that's one of the great things about TV is that it allows you to, you're making a feature. It's like you write the thing, it's a finite thing, and that's it. But then here, it's like, oh my God, I have to write more scenes for them, and you see how they're vibing and how things are working. So unfortunately, we didn't get the opportunity to do that with Randy, but we did with like Brent, for example. There were more scenes with Brent once we met Mark Little, who was a comedian that we fell in love with and offered the role to. And, and some others that like, Nathan Dales from Letterkenny. I was like, oh, let's do another scene with him, and let's find ways to do that. So there were, you get that. And now we've even, getting into season 2. And if we're that lucky, we know more things we want to do with some characters as well, in very fun ways, because we fell in love with them. And now it's like find ways to like lean into that dynamic more than you can. But yeah, Graham Barrett's, everybody should look him up. Audio Opera on Instagram. It's just goddamn hilarious.
So I was wondering if we're supposed to be in a certain time, like, is this the early 2010s? I noticed there were some flip phones in there. Or is it not supposed to be? Are we just kind of...
I think we're not. I think technically we're not supposed to say. They didn't want us to say what it was, but it's 2008.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's if anyone is paying close enough attention, they'll figure it out. But what we like to live in more of that nebulous space. I think if there's something fun about yeah, I think it's more fun. Yeah, I think it's fun to do and to lean into. And, I think for us, when we talked about the adaptation process of the comic and what was there, so like, there are characters. I mean, there's, YouTube has an element that plays into one of the characters in the comic. And I was like, oh man, that's going to be weird though. Like, I just feel like, should somebody be droning over Wausau now and taking TikToks of what's happening? Like, yeah, it just felt odd. It started to open doors that I didn't want to walk through, like as a writer. So I think it was, if we can get more into like the early days of social media to where it's not as prevalent, that's going to give us a little more freedom to kind of play with, and that phones, you can't, and it always annoys me when like you could just stop and search on your phone and find out whatever you want pretty quickly now, different things. And that era, pre-BlackBerry type stuff in that world, pre-smartphone, I should say, type stuff. I think that's really where it kind of it allows enough restrictions on our characters that it makes it more fulfilling as a creator.
Yeah. There was also a component, I think, Aaron and I talked a lot about how, you write, it's easier to sort of write, what in these worlds. So it's like, we wanted to do something where the time period felt like we were sort of Dana's age around that same period. It's just, we had this extreme, people have no idea, the extreme history of these characters that we created. I mean, just in-depth backstory that will probably never show up on screen at this point. But we had to know them inside and out. And a lot of that came from our own experiences, it's easier to do that, I think, and like Aaron said, I think the big thing was sort of the internet conveniences that occur. And there's still the internet there, but it's just much less. And, there's a certain level of freedom you get, I think, from period. I think a lot of filmmakers are doing it more and more now because of how quick things are in terms of communication. So that's an element for sure. And we definitely wanted to do that. But yeah, I think, there's many reasons to put it in the past, and also 2008 is like period, but not period so much that you're like having to find, classic cars to line the streets. Essentially, it's an expensive period. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Like you thrift in New Brunswick and it is 2008 clothes. Yeah. So it works great, so that worked out relatively well and helped us cost wise, as far as what's there. there. There is a line, I think, in episode 6 where someone does talking about the recession and the crash. So there is, so like if you piece it all together, you'll slowly start to figure it out. Yeah. But
hipsters are now using flip phones again, and there's recessions are just cyclical in our lifetime, as we know. So I would argue, tech is the only thing dating 2000s movies right now, because we might have stagnated around 9/11. Like nothing now delineates decades anymore. Like what's the difference between the 2000s and the 2010s, other than you playing a music cue, of like a certain band? The dress, nothing goes away anymore. So everybody's kind of dressed how they've dressed for 20 years and stuff like that. So it does get a little harder. So yeah, in a way that I think you guys are making it a little more timeless by having it be sort of, there's some older cars, some newer cars, some older tech, newer tech. I think fudging it actually helps.
I agree.
Yeah. And I ask a couple questions. Some I know, some are just for the audience, but the cross-cutting of the final act, was that scripted or was that found in the edit?
That was scripted. Yeah, that was scripted. Things like, opening the door, knocking on the door, that was in the script. I think that really, when we were first developing, basically when SyFy was like, hey, we want to make this with you. And we didn't know what that meant. I thought that meant the whole show was greenlit, but that clearly was not the case. What it meant was they thankfully were going to pay us a little money to write the pilot. And Luke had already been working with Michael Marisi, who I had known as well, through Revealer. We worked together on that. And so we got together in Chicago, and actually through a connection of Luke's, we stayed at the old Wachowski offices, which was pretty rad because we literally were on the table that had the ones and zeros from the Matrix and stuff on it. And I'm like, this is super, super cool. And it just felt like we were in a great creative space, and, had a bunch of Sour Patch Kids and some random shit, and like, just had at it and started coming up with ideas. And I got to give a lot of credit to Michael, he came up with the Mrs. Shaw idea at the end of a way to do that. And then once that came in, because we always were challenging ourselves of like, when you think about what happens on Revival Day and these ideas, there were so many more ideas that we thought weren't even explored necessarily in the comic of, Dana says it in the pilot. She's like, somebody could have died and not even know it, what that means. And obviously that plays into things maybe later, who knows. But there's stuff there there were all these opportunities to kind of explore that. And, one of those was the Mrs. Shaw, where like, what if somebody died the day before, and I've always been very proud of that line at the end where she's like, well, you knew him. He was always early. He was never late, and like how heartbreaking that is for her to say, and just feeling like her husband could come back. And it's great because it deals with the unspoken that I think that Wayne's dealing with, which we, have his wife who's passed away, which we'll get more into as the season goes. And that's alluded to here. But like, he's talking about, when you die, you die. And that line too was one that was, okay, he's talking about his wife. Like, why do these people get to come back and my wife doesn't get to come back, and what that was. So all those themes were there. And then the Mrs. Shaw piece of that, that Michael he's like pitched this idea. And I was like, oh my God, just like immediate, like, yes, go, we're going to do this. And then that became this perfect thing to kind of cross cut. And Kurt Laub, who's our main pilot editor, took that to another level in the way that we did it. And we really crafted, like the step to the step and the thing and like all these things. And Luke and I are big on transitions, and how to get from scene to scene. It helps everything kind of feel more fluid and movement. It's a way to make smaller things feel bigger because of the cohesiveness. Like just naturally when you're watching something and you see those things like fall in place, you start to give into a show more because it feels like, oh, they're pulling me along in a very specific, thoughtful, purposeful way. And so, yeah, that was very important. But I would say what makes that crosscut work, which, it goes back to, like, we talked about this, like Nolan crosscuts, right? Like he's probably the best of current filmmakers at the crosscut of like taking two action sequences or two moments and having them culminate. Andor does it very well. Tony Gilroy does it very well. Michael Clayton in there too. Like there's just great examples of this. But what has to work though is the music, right? You gotta have this that can play both the solemn scene as you're going to Mr. Shaw's house and you're seeing the reality of what's there, and you're scared at the beginning of both, and then something becomes sad and something else becomes scary. And that music has to play both and escalate and dance between those two scenes. And that was where, Lydia Ainsworth, who's our main composer, especially the pilot, and then Alex Cuervo, who Luke and I worked with on Revealer. He's like one of my older friends now in the industry. He's I think scored 5-6 movies I've done now at this point. And they kind of created this crescendo, of this, we always said it was like a Philip Glass, Morricone type thing and what it's becoming. And I just thought they just did something really, really special. And I think that just helps make that scene really work, and kind of wanted to shout them out because I think that's what elevates it.
No, for sure. Really, the question, I was waiting for you to say Silence of the Lambs because that was certainly the vibe it gave off of the misdirect with the crosshead, because that was a follow-up. Was Michael or either of you referencing that at the time when it became part of the script?
100%. Yeah. We mentioned Silence of the Lambs multiple times.
Still such an effective misdirect in that film. Every time I watch it, it always gets
I will say we did a pre-premiere in the theater, just a private family and friends thing with quite a few people. And I when I knew this pilot really worked for the first time, as people were crying at the Mrs. Shaw scene. And I was like, okay, all right. I think that's it for me. We did it. Yeah. So that meant a lot. Yeah.
No, I mean, it hits home. And again, the mystery aspect, you guys are compounding upon what was in the book and so many unexplored things of Erin mentioning, like her asking about what about other people that might have died in and around on the day? Mm-hmm. How do we know it's just that many? Was it 43 or 40? I forget the number. But and then the Leftovers vein too, like part of I think why that show resonated with people was each season was a little different and heavier. But what would happen? Like people would lose their mind. People would join cults and all that kind of stuff. Like if something like this happened, it would be doomsday to part of the population. It would be a wake up call to the other part of the population. And yeah, there's so much to explore there. So we're excited to see how you guys do exactly that.
Yeah, I do think it was important for us to explore all these different themes. And I think that was part of why we were taking Blaine in a little bit of a different direction. I mean, he still has that preacher background, but we start to hint at that. Now, granted, that's not in the pilot, but that is a character that, we'll start to really, you get that introduction. Originally, he was in the pilot at one point, but we moved that. And he gets his intro in episode 2. But he'll start to take that mantle as a big part of, some of these other factions that get kind of created within Wausau. But yeah, you need to feel out what's happening in the town. Like, how are they going to react? And I think it was an interesting decision from Tim and Mike to start the comic, kicking off this 35 days later. I thought that was a really smart place to be, because it kind of throws you get to skip some of the normal stuff that would have to go through and like those questions that you would ask that could be a little boring or exposition heavy. And instead you get just to come in, and don't get me wrong, we do start with an exposition dump, right? Where you jump in and you're getting what's happening there from the news and what's going on. Voiced by Katie Stoll, my partner, and who's a former news anchor. And as we rope into all of that, I think it gets to kind of kick you off with like, we're already understanding, we have a baseline of where we're at so that we can kind of escalate the drama in different directions and what's been happening, the conflict that's been created both in the town and within the Cypress family. So it was fun, but that's credit to them, for Tim and Mike, for kind of kicking it off that way, and we could kind of build off that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember Tim telling me early on, a lot of the idea for that was just the sense that it's Midwestern Wisconsin, right? Is like, yeah, if the dead come back to life, that's all nice and good, but people are just going to want to know when they have to go back to life, right? Like they just, I got to go to work, and I got to go get the groceries, and I got to, what I mean? There's that just working class, middle America feeling of just like, well, yeah, okay, this thing happened. I guess we got to, but there's always going to be that underlying thing. They're just not going to talk about it. And that was a very Wisconsin thing that he wanted to put in there. And I thought that was just so interesting to just start in that world of, well, I guess we got to make things go back to normal. What other choice do we have?
Say he was on the right track, as we've experienced a global pandemic and other things in the past few years, and apparently aliens are real, and that gets revealed, and all of us are just like, okay, do I still have to pay my mortgage? Like we keep on moving on no matter what. Like everybody just keeps on going. Oh, there's a riot outside, do I have to go to work tomorrow? Yes. And then I don't, we just keep moving.
That is built into Revival for sure, which I think is one of the things that makes it such an interesting IP.
Probably more closely than might have even realized the examples you gave. But yeah, I won't go there yet. That's for a future episode.
I have a question about, it kind of has to do with Tim. I think I noticed a couple of Easter eggs in the episode. I watched it twice. Uh-huh. The first one, Cooper was reading, I believe, one of Tim's old comic books.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, did I hear a shout out to Paper Street? Yeah.
Paper Street security team.
Yeah. Should I be looking for more? Do I need to watch it more times? Okay.
Oh, yeah. We have so many. There's a bunch of Easter eggs. Yeah. Should we list them? Do you want to list a few, or
leave that to
let people people find him.
I mean, he does. Speaking of Tim, I mean, Wayne does literally say, like, I'll get the Sealeys to watch Cooper. He does say that at the beginning.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he says that. I also have, because I was the time period of this, I have put a number of Indiana Pacers things that I've hidden in there throughout the season. So silly. That's for Pacers fans. But no, there's a ton, and there's a number of Sealeys comics do come into play, I will say, in other episodes as well.
Yeah, big time.
Which is really fun. And we highlight a couple of those in very specific ways. But yeah. I mean, I think Luke and I, we want to have fun with this. I mean, so much of what it is we're trying to make are things that it's so hard for anyone who's listening to this. And it's like, you have so many things to choose from. And it's like, why should you give us your time? And so I try to think about that. We always talk about, like, what is the audience experiencing and what would we want? Like, why would I watch this show? Not just like, I really hope someone watches it, but like, what would actually get me to want to care enough to do this? And I think knowing that we're giving you the benefit of the doubt, knowing that we're not going to force certain things down your throat, you're going to be able to organically kind of digest this and then be rewarded for paying attention. But then you could probably, still enjoy it on a cursory view. But for those who want to dig and, dive deep into anything, there is so much there, not just Easter eggs, but like hints to things. Like, I really am proud of this. And it's that there is no scene. I mean, there's no innocuous scene. Like, oh, that's just nothing happens in that scene. Everything has a purpose and a meaning. And if it even feels like, well, what could that possibly have to do? It'll come back into play later. There are things that you might just kind of like, oh, they're just doing this tropey thing. But then 4 episodes from now, we might reference something that you might not realize. Like, oh my God, like that was this, I mean, there's in the pilot, without giving anything away, there is a scene in the pilot that we will revisit in a future episode, and it will be totally different than what you thought the scene was before. And I think that's just really fun. And that was something that we like to rewatch things. We like to dive deep. I used to be on the old IMDb message boards coming up with theories and stuff and what it is. And we hope that the number of reviewers have already called it a mystery box show. And that's very much what it is. I mean, we've referenced J.J. Abrams' speech on the mystery box. We've talked about what that is. We've studied how those are constructed and tried to play with that in a very specific way, but also not in a pandering way, like lean into what those tropes are, but then zig when you think we're going to zag, pull the rug out from under you, kind of set up something that you think is going to go that direction and then go a different direction. Was a lot of fun. But the Easter eggs, the references, the rewatch, what you can pick up on rewatches, I think is a lot of fun. And it's something that it's what I love most and why I can rewatch shows, is like knowing what's happening. And then you figure that out. And then we're thinking about, oh, on the rewatch, this is going to be so much more fun for them now. They're going to see what's actually being said and what that means. And it's a thing that we're really proud of and we really pushed for.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's exciting. You guys have mentioned, Stephen Ogg showing up and others. We haven't even mentioned some of the cast that will show up that will be recognizable faces. Are you able to tease anything that's to come other than obviously stay tuned, everyone, for the season? But anything you can pitch to look forward to?
I think what I just said was a good tease, but I will. I can keep teasing. I'll keep teasing.
No, you did a very good job.
No, but I think it's what we really tried to explore. And again, from the audience POV is just, I'll talk specifically about people who don't know the comic first. And I think, okay, I want a murder mystery. We're going to constantly twist you on where you think that is. Now that you know that someone has died, do we even know, is it a murder? I think it's going to be a question you're going to start asking yourself. And then what happened? And I think it's every time you think I think the amount of times we would sit in the writer's room and we would say, okay, they obviously know this is going to happen. This is what I would think. I would think this. So then we have to fight against it. And how do we pull that back? So now it can't be that. There were times too where there's a big twist that happens in a future episode where literally in the writer's room, it was like, well, the only person it can't be is this. And I was like, then why can't it be? And Luke and I think as much as it's fun for you to watch a character get stuck and get out of it. I mean, if you really analyze television, and even movies and to that regard, anytime I think you'll realize like how exciting it is to watch someone be in a tough situation. Like, how could they possibly get out of this? And to watch them get out of it. We did the same thing to ourselves as writers, where we would say, okay, how can we like write ourselves into a corner and then we have to figure out a way to make it work? To where sometimes we knew there were big moments in the comic that we wanted to hit, but we were like, well, what if we could end the episode and this happens? And we'd be like, okay. I mean, yeah, that'd be amazing. But how the hell is that going to happen? And we're like, let's force ourselves to come up with something. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But I think what'll be fun is when you, a savvy viewer who watches the Mayor of Easttowns and the Fargos and these murder mystery shows, in a very specific way, True Detectives, you'll pick up on certain tropes, but then I think you'll find that hopefully I think you'll have a lot of fun along the way to where we don't take ourselves too seriously. But then but I also think you could find a scene where you might cry. I mean, Luke and I at one point, there's a scene later in the season and Luke and I were both crying. Looking at each other as we're filming this. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is so moving and so emotional. And there's other scenes where we're laughing and ruining takes, like in between. So it was everything in between. And I think if we could balance that tone, it'd be very, very special. And I think that's what they can expect is like to have a fun show that is a mystery box show but is also character based. And then I would say for the fans of the comics, what's really fun was for us to, let's set up on a path where you're like, oh, I know the storyline. This is what happened in the comic. And then right when you think it's supposed to do the thing you think it's going to do, it maybe does or doesn't, but goes a different direction. And you're like, well, wait, no, that's not supposed to happen. I don't remember that in the comic. But it's still like the same basic structure. And then you get surprised and then characters get combined and like this character's now this and this character's now this. And so, but it was very deliberate to try to find what the expectations are, both as a viewer and as a comic fan, and to say, I expect this so that we can still create a rewarding viewing experience for them so that it twists at the right times, and to use those expectations of both genre convention, murder mystery convention, procedurals, but then what the comic fan themselves expect, and then use those to our advantage to then pull the rug out from under them. And I think that was hopefully something that we pulled off.
No, for sure.
I just want to say, I like the whole feel of it's fantastic. It is, I said this before we started recording, it's like my favorite genre is like spooky funny. And it's very like supernaturally, I don't know if you saw iZombie, but I like that show. It's kind of like that. Like it's light, but it's spooky. Yeah. Buffy or whatever. Do either of you have a favorite line or a specific favorite moment from the show, from the first episode?
I mean, I do. I do. So it's always been, and it's a stupid line. And I know Sean had mentioned it once before, but it really is. But these horse people are so weird from Miles Miller. It was just one of those things where I like to write jokes in inappropriate times. I first of all in life, I tell jokes in inappropriate times. So it totally makes sense. And I just think that you can have these like tense moments. And one of the things that was important was we're in the pilot, you're building up Miles to be this like super scary bad guy. So you're going and it's like, don't go there. This is bad. We want to set up the stakes. And then to just be like, no, this is a dude who died in prison, which is another one of those examples of like, is not in the comic at all. And like, what happens if you were serving a life sentence and then you die in prison and then you get revived? Well, then you served your life, quote unquote, life sentence, right? So I thought that was a really interesting, compelling story. And it's something we want to explore more. And it's another character that we wish, once we saw Josh Krudis, who plays Miles, we wish we could have done more of, which, by the way, Miles Turner, Reggie Miller, Indiana Pacers. But, we wanted to explore that more because it was so fun to kind of dive into what that was. But when you get to the scary scene, right, and to make a long story, not short, but shorter, when you reach this moment and it culminates and you've got this conflict and this action and you're scared for Dana and there's this axe fight and what's happening, then at the end, we need to decompress you so that you no longer fear this man. And Dana's got to be asking about a horse. And I don't know, I think that was in one of the first drafts of the script years ago. And once we finally had the Miles Miller thing, once we made that fully work. Mm-hmm. And you horse people are so weird because I may or may not have said that to Sean a few times growing up. So
we were raised around some horse people, and to a T, they're weird people. And we can say that because we're friends with them. That's how that works, right?
Yes. There's great horse people. Don't get me wrong. All power to you.
Weird.
But they're weird.
Sometimes they get they just go a little too far sometimes. They just go a little
Luke, how about you? Did anything stand out as far as a line or a moment that would be different than the horse line?
So, yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is don't tell Dad, right? I mean, like, it's what makes the comic. I think it's, immediately you're like, yeah, this is where this has got this is where this got to go. But what I will say is my favorite moment when I watch the pilot, the moment that I just wait for, is Em and Dana in the car. I love that scene so dearly. And Aaron and I talked a lot about that scene. We're like, if this doesn't work, the pilot doesn't work. Like, that's how important this is, because you've got these two characters. They're not together at all this whole time. And we're really kind of just keeping it light on Em in a lot of cases for obvious reasons. And so you have this one moment, and it's a story about sisters, and it's a story about, this relationship. And if that moment doesn't work, and it's a moment from the comics, you know what I mean? And we knew how important it was even from then. But even in this case, just the way that we structured the episode, it was even more important. And it was one of the final things we shot. And I'm just so proud of it. It's just, I think, like, I get there and every single time I watch it, I choke up. It feels so real and so sincere. And I just feel the years of history there. And I think, just as a writer, as a creator, I think it's wonderful. So.
Yeah, I do love that scene so much. And I pushed really hard for us to do all of our driving stuff at the end because in our production schedule for a variety of reasons. But one of the biggest was because I wanted them to have built the rapport, to have this down pat, to kind of work through the kinks before we do that scene, because that scene, and again, you have this, we've set a dude on fire, which we literally set a dude on fire. We're in the barn doing that iconic scene from the comic, cutting heads off and all this stuff and crazy things, jumping down from rafters, all these things. But that is the heart of not just this episode, but of the series. And I remember we rewrote it so many times, and then it got to the very end and we actually were able to watch the entire episode outside of that scene. So then it was, okay, now let's rewrite this. And there's new things that were added that really made a lot of sense that later we're going to be able to call back to. There's things that, you allude to and you don't know what they all mean yet, and things that they're talking about that are extremely important, toward later in the series. And yeah, it just was getting to do that together. And we brought in Hannah, who's the director for the driving scenes. And, and I remember just watching this in this little warehouse in Ottawa, shooting this stuff and just seeing the two of them who had just, Dana and Em and, Mel and Romy, reaching this peak of like, they love each other. Like, they've become such good friends. They're really like sisters, and they're there and they're knowing how important this is. And this is the pilot after we've shot for months and months and months, right? All this stuff we've done. And just the way that there's that moment where they say asshole, you're talking about Derek, and then they look at each other and you're just like, this is great, like this is so the vibe. And even like Dana, so Mel improvised that in a low moral bar. Like, she improvised that in the thumbs up, so then we said, I was like, oh, do that again and do the thumbs up. And I remember that because that was a thing. It was I have a taser and a gun. That's all that I wrote. I wrote the boring stuff. Then she adds the low moral bar, which is great and completely. But that was, she had figured out the character at this point, and if we had shot that at the beginning, that wouldn't have been there. And that's in all the trailers and everything we do. And that's why you cast someone like Melanie, who understands the moment. And, and I think you feel M's meekness in that moment. You feel the world kind of like the weight on her shoulders, the way that she's having to be sheltered. And it's just this soft moment where they're like, hey, let's go have an adventure together. Yeah, the sisters are finally going to come together and they're going to do something. And right when they're about to do that, slam on the brakes, literally and figuratively. And we are now thrust in an entirely different world and a new mystery. And that became, originally that scene happened early in the one of the first drafts. It's actually Dana goes to her apartment to find her, and there's a discussion. It just didn't feel right. And it said, let's just pull this all back. Let's wait and then just have one scene here at the end. And it's right before shit hits the fan. And now we're off and running from that point, and where that is. But, what is their adventure together? How are they going to have that adventure together? And what does that represent from here is just a fun question to ask. And they just killed it. I'm so glad. But yeah, I'm very, very proud of that scene. I think it's really special.
No, it's cool to know that it came late in the game and you guys tweaked it accordingly, because yeah, it definitely works. And good on Melanie for that improv line, because it is a smile moment every time I watch the trailer. Like and then watching the episode here, just she sells it with a fun facial expression, thumbs up, the whole thing. But yeah, again, bravo to you both for this episode. We would like to incorporate some fan theories, some speculation going forward when folks do watch these episodes and maybe have some thoughts on it. We will direct you actually to an email in paperstreetpodcast.com if you want to submit anything, but we might also scour the internet ourselves and find some stuff and bring it to the show to discuss, just to see where fans are at and where they think stuff might be going. So stay tuned for that in future installments of this podcast. But yeah, gentlemen, again, I want to thank you, Aaron, Koontz, Luke Boyce, your Revival creators, showrunners, and EPs. Episode 1 in the books, as is this recap of it. Congrats again on the show. Cannot wait for episode 2 myself. Cannot wait to discuss it with Liz. On behalf of Liz, on behalf of Aaron, on behalf of Luke, I am Sean Talley saying it's true, horse people are indeed weird, and also never trust people in matching overalls. So thank you all for listening, gang. We appreciate it. We'll see you back here very soon.
Thanks.